Welcome to the guide, Exile. So after making the Brutus Lead Sprinkler Berserker, and the Namahu's Ball Toss Berserker, I was still yearning for something more. I just felt that we needed more, well, we needed more balls. But now, with the introduction of the new Ancestral Call support gem, and the new Grellwood Shank swords, we are able to up our ball production to ludicrous levels with this Molten Struck Scion. And you don't even have to get a Zoph's Blood or any other very expensive uniques. Ancestral Call procs up to 2 Ancestral Spirits that attack nearby targets with the active skill that they are supporting. This means that when we attack 2 or more monsters, we will proc these spirits to mimic our Molten Strike, tripling our ball output. This support can also be used on bosses if we stand slightly back from the boss and ground target the Molten Strike with an attack in place, proccing 1 Ancestral Spirit on the boss, allowing our balls to, well, overlap. This support also lets us comfortably map with Molten Strike, providing us near full screen coverage on large packs of monsters. The Grellwood Shanks provide us with a few amazing bonuses on top of being very cheap. For starters, they provide a +2 additional projectiles if we have been hit recently. So if we dual wield them, we will get +4 additional projectiles to each Molten Strike proc, even on the Ancestral Spirits. They also provide us with Point Blank, saving us some passive points on the tree. The Iron Reflexes is also very nice, as it allows us to gain some more flat mitigation from our various unique evasion gear, as we will be needing to get hit. So now let us explore the details of the build, and of course, our balls per second calculations. As with almost all Molten Strike builds, you are able to start off very strong on cheap gear and scale its damage to ludicrous levels with further gear investment. This means that the character has a lot of room to grow, but even on a 5-link, this build absolutely crushes content all the way through leveling to the endgame. Offensively, we are using Molten Strike as our main skill. With Ancestral Call, we are not only able to kill bosses very effectively, but also clear maps at very respectable speeds. To ensure that we deal fire-only damage and fully benefit from elemental penetration, we grab Avatar Fire in the tree for full fire conversion. For weapons, we will be dual-wielding the Grellwood Shanks for the +4 global projectiles, along with the dual-wielding bonuses. We will also be scaling attack speed through Onslaught, Frenzy Charges, and utility skills. For even more damage stacking, we will be making use of 8 Abyssal Jewels with fire damage to attacks and life. Finally, we will be using Anger for some more flat fire damage. Defensively, we are mainly stacking life. With the Belly of the Beast and average gear and jewels, we are able to reach 7,500 life without issue. On top of this, we will also be using the Scion's Slayer Leech to help keep our leech always running, even after we are on full life. This makes bossing much safer as we never have to restack leech instances after taking a big hit from full life. We can also make use of the Soul of Arakali Pantheon, which provides us 50% increased life recovery rate after an Immortal Call procs when our blood rage is up. This brings our leech rate up to 34.5% of our maximum life per second. Beyond the life and life leech, we also have Armor, Arctic Armor, and Fortify for mitigations. Finally, we have Flasks and Ancestral Protector with an attached Blind for elongated fights to ensure that we avoid some hits where we can. Now for the most important part, the balls per second calculation. With the Scion, we are able to maintain Frenzy Charges and Onslaught on unique targets with the Raider Ascendancy. This provides us a massive amount of attack speed on top of our utility skills, gear, and passive tree that we can also maintain on unique targets for extended fights. So as a base, we have about 11 attacks per second with all our maintainable buffs up. For items, we will start with the basics: Ancestral Call, Wildfire Jewels, and Grellwood Shanks. This will result in 11 balls per Molten Strike hit, for a total of 363 balls while mapping, and 242 balls while on single target. Whew, that's a lot of balls. Even more than the Ball Toss Berserker. But wait, that's not all. We can produce even more balls. If we add in the Molten Strike Helmet enchantment for +3 projectiles and the Dying Sun for +2 projectiles, we will then have 16 balls per Molten Strike hit, for a total of 528 balls per second against mapping targets, and 352 balls per second against single target. Now that's what I call some spicy ball production. As for playstyle, there isn't too much to worry about as most of the build's utilities, such as Blood Rage and Golem, are automated. All you will need to do is Whirling Blades into monsters and start swinging away with your Molten Strike, covering them in hot balls. I recommend using your attack and place key to ensure that you are ground targeting. This is so that your character won't walk all around to target enemies, as we only care about the balls hitting them and not the melee hit. For bosses, you'll want to drop your Ancestral Totem and stand slightly back from them to ground target and proc 1 Ancestral Spirit from the Ancestral Call support. The passive trees and Path of Building Pastebin are included in the description. Pros and cons for the build. Some pros include: cheap and very strong for mapping and bossing. It can effectively face tank most all the content in the game. A very satisfying Molten Strike ball coverage. Vol Pact is not required. You get lots of balls. What more could you want? Cons. It's not a tier 1 map clearing build, but does go very fast. Our class and Ascendancy for this build is the Scion, with the Slayer and Raider Ascendancies. The Slayer Ascendancy allows us to maintain our Leech instances through full life, providing us very reliable sustain on fights when we take a big hit from full life. We stun enemies that are on full life, granting us some grace time whilst our Molten Strike balls begin to fall. And finally, we gain generic increased damage against rare and unique enemies. The Raider Ascendancy is very powerful, providing us the ability to maintain massive amounts of attack speed in all encounters. We generate frenzy charges from Blood Rage and on hit against rare and unique monsters, along with Onslaught while we are on full frenzy charges, effectively freeing up a Flask slot. For Ascendancy progression, I would follow this order. We grab the following keystones in the passive tree. Avatar of Fire. This keystone fully converts our physical damage into fire damage for our Molten Strike, allowing us to make proper use of elemental and penetration scalers. Elemental Overload. Since we are not heavily scaling critical strikes and we are so close to this keystone, we grab it for the 40% more elemental damage. We will just have to ensure that we get enough critical strike chance to proc it often enough. Iron Grip. For 1 point, this keystone converts all of our strength damage modifiers to apply to our projectile attacks. Overall, this keystone provides us with about 5% of our total damage. Not too bad. Here's the complete endgame passive tree. Defensively, we are picking up a lot of life, percentage base, and base life from strength. Offensively, we grab a lot of generic elemental and projectile modifiers, along with 7 jewel sockets to fit in as many abyss jewels as possible. I would follow this progression into the final tree. You will want to socket your 2 wildfire jewels in the sockets outlined by the bright blue circles on the passive tree as soon as you can. For bandits, we will be killing all of them for the 2 passive points. You can also pick up Resolute Technique until you get Elemental Overload. You can also spec into Point Blank in the tree until you get the Grell Woods. Pantheons for the build include Soul of Arakali. This is for the 50% increased life recovery rate. Ensure to capture the first soul of this Pantheon for this to work. Soul of Tukahama, for more mitigation and regeneration whilst we face tank. Here are the following gem links for the build. Support gem links are shown in order of importance. 4 links can go in the helmet, gloves, boots, and 3 links can go into weapons. Gems with set level are either due to their effect not scaling with level requirement or for cast on damage taken. For mapping, I suggest using Chance to Ignite for the percentage more fire damage multiplier over increased area of effect, as we already get insane area coverage. For bosses, swap this with a concentrated effect for point blank and overlapping balls. If you do not like using Ancestral Call on serious endgame bosses, you can instead use Fire Penetration. Due to the use of some new Abyss uniques, we will only have 1 4-link, as the Abyss uniques have an Abyss socket in lieu of a gem socket. Our 4-link will be our main movement skill. The Leap Slam is used for traversing gaps in terrain. You may swap it out for another single gem if you wish. This will trigger our Pantheon and curse offending monsters with an offensive curse or a defensive curse. Flammability can be swapped with Enfeeble, and if you do use this in a 4-link, you can also add increased duration. There's no unique gear required to start this build, even though we are basing it around the swords, as Molten Strike will still work without them. However, there are many useful uniques that you can use, and here are the ones that I use. Wildfire Jewels. These are the bread and butter of starting your journey to an ample ball generation. You will be socketing these in the tree as quickly as possible. Grellwood Shanks. These weapons provide a crazy amount of useful stats as mentioned before, and you will be crazy not to use them. Free projectiles, point blank, iron reflexes, and fast attack speed. Starkonja's Head. This helmet is a great all-around option, providing attack speed, critical strike chance to proc our elemental overload, a lot of life, and high evasion base to grant us more armor. Belly of the Beast. Since we are stacking so much flat life, the percentage increase on this chest translates to a lot of effective HP, nearly 1000 life with the proper gear. Tomb Fists. These are excellent choice for gloves. These are cheap in the Abyss League, and provide you with attack speed, percentage increased life, and an Abyss Jewel socket with Intimidation. Intimidation will effectively grant you 10% more damage. You will want to ensure that you socket a Murderous Eye Jewel in this pair of gloves. Rare gloves will also work if you are not in the Abyss League. Bubonic Trails. These boots are another excellent choice for the Abyss League, providing another Abyss Jewel socket and percentage increased damage for each Abyss Jewel type that you are affected by. For this build we can get Murderous Eye and Searching Eye Jewels, granting us 20% increased damage on our boots. Since we are stacking a lot of flat damage and not as much percentage increased damage, this small percentage on the jewel socket stands out, granting us roughly 1/9 of our damage. The Death Walk on these boots simply explodes corpses as we walk over them, which isn't heavily used in this build. Here are other optional uniques. A Carnage Heart. This is a good starting amulet if you cannot find a good rare amulet. It provides us increased damage while leeching, all elemental resistances, and a lot of attributes. Combs Roots. These can be used for the extra life if it is felt necessary. Just note that you will lose gem sockets and the chance to evade attacks from our blind utility. I would recommend using a good pair of rare boots with over 100 life instead. Rat's Nest. It is much like a hybrid between the Starkanja's and a Devoto's helmet, but does not provide any life, but still provides good offensive stats. Zoph's Blood. This is a very expensive amulet, but provides Avatar Fire, Fire Penetration, percentage increased maximum life, and covers enemies that hit you in Ash, making them take 20% increased damage. This is basically best in slot amulet, but is in no way required for the build to work. For rare gear, we will be looking at armor or armor evasion hybrid based gear. Here are the affixes that we want to look for on our gearing, along with all the rare gear that was used on my character. For jewels, we will mainly be wanting to get Abyss Jewels. However, I will provide the stats you want to look for on both regular and Abyss Jewels. There are only a few requirements of your rare gear. For jewels, you'll want to try and get at least 1 or 2 Abyss Jewels with percentage increased critical strike chance if you have not dealt a critical strike recently. This greatly helps with filling out your critical strike chance to consistently proc your elemental overload. For your belt, you will want to try and get a Stygian belt so that you can socket another Abyss Jewel in it. For enchantments, you will want to look for the 3 additional Molten Strike projectiles. This enchantment is insanely strong, providing you 9 more projectiles with your Ancestral Call. For boots, you could look for increased attack speed if you had killed recently, for mapping, or penetration if you are bossing. For corruptions, you could look for a +1 to maximum frenzy charge on boots. For recovery flasks, you will want to have the following rolled with instant or increased recovery rate. For utility flasks, you want to make use of the following: a granite or basalt flask. Here you can use either a granite or basalt depending on the content you are completing. For harder hitting bosses, a basalt may prove better mitigation. Stibnite. This is a great defensive flask for mapping, reducing the number of hits we take due to the blinding effect. We will still of course get hit to proc our Growwoods, but not overwhelmed. A sulfur flask. This grants us increased damage and life regeneration. A great all-around flask. Here are the unique flasks that I use and recommend. The Wise Oak. This is a great cheap flask that provides a maximum of 15% elemental penetration. This flask works such that it will penetrate for your highest uncapped elemental resistance. So for us, we want to get our fire resistance to be the highest uncapped resistance. Make sure to watch my damage and elemental resistance video for more information on how resistances work and are named. Dying Sun. This is an amazing flask for the build as it not only provides us some defense for fire damage as it is a ruby base, but it provides us 2 more projectiles to our Molten Strike, bringing us to 6 more projectiles with the Ancestral Call. Leveling this build is very straightforward, but as always there are many leveling uniques that make the experience much faster, easier, and more fun. These are the following. Elrion minus mana cost jewelry is very useful until we make use of a Thief's Torment. I highly recommend using this ring as it provides excellent life and mana sustain for your Molten Strike and life pool, and allows you to reserve almost all your mana during leveling. Without either of these, you will need a mana flask. For your gem progression, I recommend the following. From here, you'll want to fill out the rest of your skill gems as listed in the guide. Multi-strike can be used once you get it, or you can wait until the end of Act 10 to use it once you have enough attack speed scaling. I found without it, I was one-shotting most monsters with the tabula and leveling gear, so it was unnecessary. Well, Exile, I hope that this build has satiated your desire for more molten balls to shower your enemies in. I've had a bunch of fun playing this build, and it has proven to be very strong. Finally, the Scion coming through for a spicy ball build. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, Exile.